So let's talk about one of the most powerful and maybe one of the most overlooked patterns in all of human history. According to a fascinating analysis by Professor Jing Sheiqin, there's a cycle that's been repeating for 3,000 years, and it might just predict the fate of the world's current superpower. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so this is the big idea, the one sentence that unlocks everything else we're going to talk about. The argument is simple, but wow, is it bold? It says that without a single exception, any great empire that tries to take on the civilization we know as Iran, or Persia, basically meets its end there. It's a huge claim, so let's see the evidence.
So we're going to walk through 5 huge historical examples. You know that old saying, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes? Well, the argument here is that in this case, the rhyme is so loud it's basically shouting at us. And just look at this timeline for a second. This isn't some pattern that only happened in one era. We are talking about a phenomenon that stretches over 2,300 years, from the ancient Greeks all the way to the Cold War, and it involves completely different kinds of empires. First on the list, Alexander the Great. Now you might be thinking, hold on, didn't he win? And yeah, you're right, he did conquer Persia, but here's the catch. The victory was incredibly short-lived. He died at just 32, and his empire just shattered almost overnight. And guess who rose from the ashes? The Parthians, an Iranian dynasty that ended up ruling for nearly 500 years. So a tactical win for Alexander turned into a massive strategic victory for Iran. Next up, the Roman Empire. I mean, we're talking about the undisputed superpower of its day. For 300 years, Rome tried and failed to bring Persia to its knees. They suffered humiliating defeats. Emperors were literally killed in these campaigns. And after all that time, the Roman Empire collapsed. The Persian Empire, still standing. Okay, the Arab Caliphate is a totally different story. And this is where it gets really fascinating. Militarily, they won. They conquered Iran in the 7th century. But then, something incredible happened. Iran basically conquered its conquerors, culturally. Persian language, art, science, and philosophy didn't just survive, they became the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. Iran was taken over, but it completely transformed as new rulers from the inside out. Now this one might be the most dramatic example of all, the Mongols. They were, without a doubt, one of the most terrifyingly effective military forces in human history. They leveled entire cities, and yes, they conquered Iran. But just a few generations later, what happened? The Mongol rulers converted to Islam and adopted Persian culture. They became the biggest fans of the very civilization they had almost destroyed. And just to show you this isn't all ancient history, let's fast forward to the modern era with the Soviet Union, a nuclear superpower. Twice in the 20th century, they occupied parts of northern Iran, and both times they were forced to pack up and go home. That 1946 crisis was actually one of the very first stare-downs of the Cold War, and it was the Soviets who blinked. So you have to ask, right? Why does this keep happening? Is it just a massive 2,000-year-long coincidence? Well, this analysis says absolutely not. Using a kind of game theory, looking at the deep structural rules of the game, it points to 4 fatal flaws that pretty much guarantee empires will fail when they go up against Iran. Flaw number 1 is a classic military headache: strategic depth. I mean, just look at Iran. It's a huge country, about 4 times the size of Iraq, with almost 90 million people. And it's ringed by massive mountain ranges and deserts. It's an absolute nightmare to try and invade and control. And here's where the numbers get just staggering. The analysis runs the math and estimates that to actually occupy and control Iran, you need a bare minimum of 4 million soldiers. The entire active US military right now is about 1.3 million. The math just doesn't work. It's not a question of willpower, it's a logistical impossibility. The second flaw is all about structure. So think of a normal military like a pyramid, right? You've got tons of cheap, flexible infantry at the wide base. Well, the argument here is that the US military is an inverted pyramid. It's top-heavy, built around unbelievably expensive jets and ships, and the source claims this is a structure designed to generate profit for contractors, not to win a long, grinding war of attrition. And this right here, this shows you the devastating result of that upside-down pyramid. It's called asymmetric cost exchange, and the math is just brutal. Iran can send over a drone that costs, say, $50,000. To shoot that drone down, the US has to fire a missile that costs at least $3 million. That's a 60-to-1 cost disadvantage. You can't win a war like that. You just bleed money until you can't afford it anymore. So the last flaw isn't about weapons or money. It's about heart. It's about the will to fight. For Iran, any conflict is framed as an existential, do-or-die struggle for their 3,000-year-old civilization. For an invading empire, well, public support at home is often shaky, the government's divided, and there's very little appetite for casualties. That imbalance in sheer motivation, it can be the single most decisive factor.
Okay, so we've covered the military side, but the analysis says this goes way beyond the battlefield. It argues this has become an economic war, one that targets the very financial foundations of American global power.
And at the core of that power is something called the petrodollar system. It's basically an agreement going back to the 70s that says all major oil sales around the world have to be done in US dollars. This creates a permanent artificial demand for dollars, which in turn lets the US fund its huge military and run massive deficits. It's kind of the secret sauce of the American empire.
You see this loop? It's pretty simple, right? The world needs oil, so the world needs dollars. This gives the United States a financial superpower that no other country has. But what happens if somebody starts to chip away at that system?
And this is where Iran's strategy snaps into focus. By showing it can control the Strait of Hormuz, this tiny choke point where 20% of the world's oil flows, Iran is taking a sledgehammer to America's credibility as the world's security guard. It's not just a military move, it's a direct attack on the petrodollar system itself.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some fringe theory. We're talking about Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment firm on the planet. He's warned that this exact situation could lead to $150 a barrel oil for years. You know what that means? A devastating global recession, all triggered by this one strategic spot.
So let's put it all together. You've got this 3,000-year-old historical pattern. You've got the 4 fatal flaws. And you've got this high-stakes economic warfare. What does the analysis predict is coming next for America?
A big part of the problem, according to this analysis, is a breakdown in long-term strategic planning. It compares the super detailed, multi-year planning process in a place like China with a Western approach that often seems reactive and based on really simple and sometimes wrong assumptions, like the assumption that an ancient civilization would just roll over.
And this might be the most crucial point of the whole analysis. We have to redefine what it even means to lose. It doesn't mean enemy soldiers marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. It means reaching a tipping point, the point where the cost of being an empire, in money, in lives, in political will, just becomes too high to pay anymore. It's not defeat, it's exhaustion. That's how the Soviet Union fell.
And that leaves us with a really provocative, kind of uncomfortable final question. If an empire's decline is really just the process of becoming unsustainable, and that empire finds itself in a conflict it literally cannot afford to win, has the fall already happened? Are we just watching the slow-motion replay?
At the end of the day, the analysis comes back to this one powerful idea. The argument isn't that Iran is some aggressive conqueror. It's that it's a historical constant, a patient 3,000-year-old civilization that simply outlasts the great powers